Good day, everyone. My name is Eldred Tang, Howe, and I'm presenting my case study titled "The Trend of Globalization After COVID-19 and the Ukraine War." This presentation examines how two major global crises, the COVID-19 pandemic and the Russian-Ukraine war, have fundamentally reshaped global trade, exchange rate dynamics, and international financial system. My focus today is to evaluate how this disruption have changed the nature of globalization and what strategy lesson can be drawn for Australian financial and trade sectors. Here's an executive overview. Globalization has entered a transition era. The pandemic and the Ukraine conflict exposed deep structural vulnerabilities in global trade and finance. The result were visible across foreign exchange market, global capital flows, and supply chains networks. We have shifted from an era of efficiency-driven globalization to one centered on resilient diversification and digital transformations. These analysts explore these changes, their macroeconomic implication, and how Australia can navigate this evolving global landscape. Next slide. Historical timeline. Before the crisis, globalization was defined by interconnected supply chains and free trade. Between 2018 and 2019, the US-China tariff conflict already began fragmenting global markets. In 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic caused a worldwide halt in trade and logistics. By 2022, Russia's invasion of Ukraine amplified energy shocks and inflationary pressures, redefining trade alliances and monetary policies. Together, this event marked the beginning of a new era, one where economic security and diversification outweigh cost efficiencies. Here's the COVID-19 supply chain shocks. According to Statista 2024, global GDP contracted by 3.4% in 2020, marking the sharpest economic decline in decades. The World Trade Organization reported that merchandise trade volume dropped by over 5%, with container falling sharply due to border closure and port restrictions. The crisis revealed how fragile just-in-time production systems had become in response firms began shifting towards just-in-case inventory management, diversifying suppliers, and localizing production to reduce risk. This shift remains one of the most defining outcomes of the pandemic. Next. The Russia-Ukraine conflict in 2022 deepened global economic uncertainties. It triggered dramatic increased energy, food, commodity prices. The International Energy Agency (IEA) reported a 68% rise in energy price, indicates while the US Energy Information Administration observes a 15% weekly drop in Russian oil exports. Inflation surged globally, forcing central banks to tighten monetary policies. For Europe, it accelerated the transition towards renewable energy and reduced reliance on Russian gas. These events cemented the link between energy security and financial stability. According to the World Trade Organization, global merchandise trade is projected to decline by 0.2% in 2025, followed by a slow recovery in 2026. The World Economic Forum notes that trade growth remains below pre-pandemic averages, heightening a shift towards regionalized trade systems. Many companies now prioritize resilient or efficiencies, adopting just-in-case strategies. We are witnessing a stronger regional cooperation across ASEAN, the European Union, and BRICS nations. Simultaneously, global capital mobility has weakened as firms reduce exposure to geopolitical risks. Now we're discussing about the Australian position. Australian economy remains deeply interconnected with the Asia-Pacific region, where roughly 65% of our two-way trade is conducted. Our key partners include China, Japan, India, and South Korea, with export dominated by iron ore, coal, natural gas, and agriculture. The government has pursued diversification strategies to reduce dependence on China and strengthen ties with the ASEAN and BRICS. This approach aligns with Australia's long-term goal or balancing economic opportunity with strategic independence. Now we're going to talk about Australian currency sensitivities. The Australian dollar AUD plays a critical role in determining trade competitiveness. Historically, the AUD depreciated during global uncertainties as investors moved to the US dollar as a safe haven. This depreciation benefits export but raises import costs and inflation risks. As a result, exchange rate stability remains a major focus for both policymakers and businesses managing international exposure. Sorry about that. Here's a key affected industries. The shocks of COVID-19 and the Ukraine war have unevenly affected industries. Agriculture faced supply disruption and fertilizer shortages. Manufacturing accelerated reshoring and automation to counter logistic risks. Energy and resources enjoyed high export revenue due to commodity price spikes. Meanwhile, digital finance and fintech sectors expanded rapidly, reflecting the growing role of the technological in trade facilitations. This industrial alignment demonstrates that innovation, sustainability, and adaptability are now the key pillars of the global competitiveness. Exchange rate implications. The crisis has reaffirmed the dominance of the US dollar in times of uncertainties. The Australian dollar, in contrast, depreciates significantly during both crises, improving export competitiveness but raising input costs. Volatile interest rate adjustment by major central banks have also driven unpredictable currency movement. The European Central Bank's 2022 highlights the policy divergence when nations adjust interest rate at different speeds. Is a major source of foreign exchange volatility. For multinational firms, this means higher hedging costs and increased financial exposure. Next slide. Exchange rate theories. To interpret this movement, these three theories apply. Purchasing power parity (PPP) links long-term exchange rate trends to inflation differences. Interest rate parity explains short-term movement through yield differential between currencies and the balance of payments. Theory suggests that sustained trade deficit weakened currency over time since 2020. Exchange rate data largely align to these models, validating their continued relevance in global financial analysis. Here's a digital globalization of a new frontier. Fintech and e-commerce and cross-border digital payment rising. Central banks exploring CBDC to enhance trade efficiencies. Blockchain improve transparency and reduce remittance costs. Digital trade define physical trade showdowns. Next slide. Policy recommendations. From a financial leadership perspective, several policy directions are essential. Stabilizing the exchange rate through targeted liquidity management and transparent monetary policies. Strengthen supply chain resilience by supporting local manufacturing and diversified trade within ASEAN. Strengthen supply chain resilience by supporting sorry about that. Adopt sustainable finance framework, integrate ESG-linked export credit and blockchain-enabled trade verification. Enhance cross-border cooperation under the IMF and WTO to mitigate future global shocks. This step will help position Australia for long-term economic security and global competitiveness. To conclude, globalization is not declining, it's transforming. We are witnessing a strategic shift towards regionalization, resilience, and digitalization. Exchange rate theories continue to provide valuable insight into the financial effect of global shocks. For Australia, the key driver in this environment lies in balancing trade diversification, currency stability, and digital innovation. In essence, globalization is evolving into a smarter, more sustainable, and more secure system. Thank you for listening, and here's your reference. Thank you, and bye-bye.